Good morning, everybody. Hi, happy Wednesday. Welcome to Scale with Strategy. My name is Elizabeth McFadden, and I'm the CEO and Director of Brand Strategy here at Novella Brand House. And unfortunately, today, my co-host, April Beach, will not be with us. She's feeling under the weather. So we hope that she gets better. But it all works out because if you've been here before, you know, we talk for no more than 15 minutes each week. And April and I discuss issues that affect companies that are scaling. And today, and we always alternate. So one week I'm talking about branding and marketing, things that affect scaling businesses, and she talks offers, signature offers, process, etc. So today is my week to host, so we won't be missing anything from April today, but we'll see her next week. So today we're talking about tips to creating an effective brand strategy. And I think what's interesting about this topic, one, when I looked back at all the different topics we've done, I haven't really discussed this, which is kind of interesting because it's really pretty basic. And maybe that's why I hadn't discussed it before for the show. But what I find really interesting, so at Novella, we work with companies that are scaling or established companies, and basically to bring their brand to where they are as a company today. And a lot of times, what happens is as a company grows and scales, they're so busy building that company, scaling that company, adding new products and services. A lot of times the way they're scaling is they're acquiring other companies, again, for maybe those a particular product or service, or to grow into, to expand their geographic reach, or to grow into another market. And what happens is you're doing all these things as a business, but you don't stop and think, I need to update my brand. I need to make sure my brand strategy is still relevant, or is relevant for where my business is today. And almost most importantly, that it still resonates with my current target audience. And again, if you've been on here, you've heard me tell the story that about 4 years ago, we actually here at Novella refreshed our own brand strategy because we had, really evolved as a company, and what our website, what it was marketing and what it was talking about was really kind of talking to a customer, a client that we used to service, but we're really servicing no longer. And so we were bringing the wrong leads into our business. And I always tell that story because even a branding and marketing firm has to always be really intentional about your brand strategy or about a brand strategy. So anyway, today I wanted to talk about tips to creating an effective brand strategy, because even if you have a brand strategy or you're like, oh yeah, we have a brand, or, a plan around that, it's good to revisit it. I would suggest at least every 2 years, just to make sure that your brand strategy still is really speaking to who your company is today, where you want to take the company, the target audience that you're serving. And so I'm just checking our comments. Oh, hi, Karen. Hi, friend. So good to see you here. I just looked into the comments. So let me dive in. First of all, and this is a great kind of think of this, yes, as tips to create an effective brand strategy, but also just almost like a checklist. If you already have a brand, so this is great for really anybody that's a scaling business. You are thinking about your brand, and you're either in one of two camps, right? You already have a brand strategy. So this is going to be these kind of tips that I talked through today are going to be great for like going through and just checking, like, yep, I still feel really good about that. This is still on track for us. Or if you are wanting to make sure that you have a really solid brand strategy, maybe you've never really created one, you just kind of cobbled it together, which a lot of times happens when companies are growing. But you now want to really make sure that brand strategy is in line, and maybe in line with your strategic plan for your company, all the things. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so the first step is start with your mission statement and your values. And sometimes people will have, okay, these are, they'll say our mission statement, our values, or our vision statement. So this is a really good place to start. And I say start really being kind of the key word. What I mean is I hear sometimes clients say, when we talk about brand strategy, they say, yeah, well, here we use our mission statement and we use our vision statement or our values. And those are a part of your brand, but those really aren't outward facing. Those are really meant to be more internally facing. So they may not really, well, one, resonate with your target audience, but they also might not make sense for your target audience because they're on the outside. They're not part of your inside team. But certainly these things should drive your brand strategy. So kind of start there. The second thing is look at sometimes people will call it the why, but it's really like the positioning. Why is your company in business? Why did you start this business? Why did you create these products and services for this target audience? Another good question to ask, and kind of what you should ultimately come out of sort of this step, is what problem are you solving for your customers? And how is that a unique solve for your customers? If you're solving a problem and doing it in the same way that your competition's doing, you don't really have a true value proposition. And it's going to be really hard to separate yourself, to differentiate yourself if your positioning is very similar to your competition. It kind of goes back to that why. Why is your product different? Why should your target audience buy your product over another? Okay, the third thing is target audience. And this is something that I really do think companies need to revisit. Now, I'm not saying that your audience changes all the time, right? I mean, because the products and the services and the why and the positioning is really all centered around your audience. And so every year you shouldn't be changing that wildly, but it does evolve over time. And what you're going to find is that maybe there's certain markets that were once really profitable for you, and for one reason or another, they're not anymore, or your product's just kind of evolved. Or I think the other thing that we really saw during the pandemic, the way that your audience buys, like their buying journey and what matters to them and all of those kinds of things, changed. And it doesn't take a pandemic to do that. That just happens because your target audience are people, and people change, people evolve. So really make sure that you have clearly defined who your audience is. Okay, next step number 4 is sizing up the competition. And again, this is something that's really good to do on, some sort of regular basis. I think 2 years is kind of a good, time to revisit this because, and a lot can happen in 2 years in terms of your competitive landscape. And also your competitors may change their positioning a little bit. So, you may have, let's say there's, 8 to 10 competitors that are kind of in your competitive landscape. Don't assume who their main audience is or who they're really going after, how they're positioning themselves. That could have changed. And so it's a really good idea. Review their websites, review their marketing and their advertising if you can find that, and just really try to, again, kind of reevaluate what their niche is and how that compares to, your positioning to your niche. Okay, now we get really kind of into, that's a lot of just, sort of research or just really kind of looking at, all the different components that affect your brand. And so now these next few steps, we really get into sort of the key components of your brand, like what should those be? So the first thing is you should have a brand statement. We also call that an elevator speech or an elevator pitch or an opening line. And I think an opening line is really key. So think of it this way. You're at a networking event and you introduce yourself and, somebody says, oh, okay, what's your company? What do you do? That opening line to sort of introduce your company should be your brand statement. It should tell, who you are, who you serve, and again, that unique solve, that value proposition we talked about earlier. And it needs to be just really clear and simple. This is really not in your opening line. This is not really the place where you want to get really creative, because what you're doing is you're introducing your company, and people at that point you want people to sort of self-select, like, oh yeah, this is something that I'm interested in, or something I need, or maybe this is something that can solve a pain point that I have, right? And if it's not, then you don't want to waste any more of their time. You don't want to waste your time. But this brand statement isn't just important in a networking situation. It's also important because it probably is going to be on your homepage somewhere. It's going to be in your social media, like the description in your social media. It's going to be, again, page 2 probably of your pitch deck. Again, it's that opening line for your company. So the next step is 3 key messages. And when I was describing the opening line, the brand statement, you're probably like, I can't keep that simple. There's so much more I want to say just beyond, our name, who we serve, and, what we do, our value proposition. So this is where the 3 key messages come into play. And think about it like this. Again, kind of take yourself back to a networking situation where you've just introduced your company with your brand statement, your opening line. And what are those next 3 things that people automatically kind of ask about, or that like the next 3 things you'd want to say about your company? And these 3 messages, these 3 key messages, again, you want to keep them very clear, very simple. They can be, it can be more creative if you want, in terms of the language of the copy, but it should speak to your customers' pain points. It could maybe speak to, if you've got like a patented, process, or you have a signature offer, or there's something really key about your unique solve, your value proposition, your product or service, that this is a good time to mention that in those 3 key messages. There's a number of other ways you can, other ways that you can create those key messages, or what you can talk about in those, that just kind of gives you an idea. But again, think about when you introduce your company and you're talking to somebody that's a prospective client or customer, like what are the next 2 or 3 things that they ask, that you usually are answering? And those are probably good places to start for your key messages. Next is supporting points. So under each key message, obviously there's more things that you want to say. So when you have more time and space, so this could be on your website, it could be in a pitch deck, a brochure, what have you, there are more things that you want to say under each of those 3 key messages. And so that's what we call the supporting points. And those all ladder up to your 3 key messages. Okay, next is a tagline. Now, this isn't you don't absolutely have to have a tagline, but I do find that it's really helpful for a lot of clients and a lot of brands. So a couple ways you might do a tagline. Let's say that you, in fact, we're working with a client right now that after 50 years, they're changing their name. And one of the concerns is that, people still think this company is the same company. And so part of their tagline for the first year is, formally blah, 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 like formally and then the old company name. So a tagline can be really useful for that. If you are celebrating a anniversary, like a 50th anniversary, 20th anniversary, 100th anniversary, whatever it might be, that is something like that can be a great tagline, commemorating that anniversary. And again, taglines don't have to be around forever. So you might just use that tagline for, say, a year and then move on to the next tagline. A tagline also can be helpful if the name of your company is maybe not as descriptive as, to the products or the services that you offer. So again, a tagline can be helpful. The key here, though, is to keep it really short, memorable. A lot of times those will come out of, if we're creating a campaign for a client, that tagline is maybe the sort of the headline of that campaign. So just some ideas there. And just some final few things on that are part of a brand strategy. Defining your brand voice and your brand tone. This is really helpful especially if you have a marketing team, you have somebody writing and posting, creating content for your social media, but they're writing copy that is reflective of your company. So you want to be really clear what sort of that brand voice is, what the tone is. You want to, describe it so that somebody can make sure that anything they write or create for you is, in that voice, in that brand voice. And that's it. So those are the key components of a brand strategy. Again, this is great. If you are a company that you're feeling like we don't really have a great outline brand strategy, these are the things to, these are the steps to go through to create that. And if you do have a brand strategy, roll them through these things and see how you're doing. All right, we are almost at 15 minutes. I'm going to wrap it up here and we'll see you guys next week. Have a great week. Thank you.